Yes, so the way we normally perceive the world is through the subject-object relationship. We believe, and more importantly feel, that I am the separate subject of experience located in my body, and that the object or world that I am viewing or experiencing is outside of myself and separate from myself. So this is the normal dualistic or subject-object relationship that characterizes most people's experience. So, as we've just seen from this morning's meditation, if we stay very close to experience itself, there aren't these two essential ingredients, mind and matter, in experience. Experience is always one seamless whole. In other words, there is no inherent duality in experience. The separate self, the separate inside self, and the corresponding outside world have artificially crystallized out of experience, out of consciousness, and seemed to assume their own independent existence as separate entities, subject and object. And this is the way we have been educated by our culture to believe and feel, and as a result, almost all our thinking, feeling, activities and relationships contain this original perspective at their origin. So certain objects, certain works of art, be they meditations, books, paintings, dances, symphonies, sonatas, have the power to either cut through or dissolve this apparent duality, this apparent distinction between the subject that sees or hears and the object that is seen or heard. And the works of art that you refer to, the books that the gentleman referred to yesterday, are examples of such objects. Objects that have this power within them to lead the apparently separate subject of experience, the viewer or the hearer, to the core, the heart or the reality of their experience. And different artists use different means. There are many different ways of doing this. Take, for instance, Cézanne, who dispensed with conventional perspective. In conventional perspective, our view is led by a series of diagonal lines to a point or an object, which is usually the focal point of the painting. But so our view is led outwards, away from ourselves, towards the object, and in doing so, ourself as the separate subject of that object is emphasized. So in asserting the object, the subject is subliminally emphasized. So Cézanne, for instance, did away with that mechanism. So particularly in those days, someone would have looked at his paintings and would have expected their attention to be led into the picture plane in order to finally come to rest on an object, but it would not have found an object to rest on because there were no pathways, no diagonal lines taking you to the object, so that the mind would have vacillated for a while, expecting to rest on an object but never finding anything to rest on. And in this way, their mind would have at first been frustrated because it doesn't find the object to rest on or focus on. But in time, someone who stayed with the experience would have found their attention, as a result, slowly being drawn back to the perceiver. In other words, back to its source. So this was just an example of a very skillful device that Cézanne used to bring the mind of the viewer to its essence.
To me, this sounds like it took a little bit of time, the time issue here. But my experience with these 3 works of art, I haven't had it with any other works of art, by the way. And I've seen quite many because I love art. But that was so instantaneous. It was instantaneous. My eyes rested on the canvas, in these cases canvas, and
yes,
like that.
Well, that's true in a painting, because in a painting the entire work of art is simultaneously present at every moment, whereas in a book or a piece of music, it takes time to, in this case, read or listen to the entire work of art. So it's true that's one of the unique qualities of a painting, is that it's present in its entirety at first glance, but even so, it very often takes time, not always, but it very often takes time to explore the painting and for it to gradually deliver its meaning. In other works of art have this more explosive power, and they can take you directly. But it's not important whether it takes
no, but I was
10
wondering,
minutes or 2 hours or on.
Not at all. But I was wondering, what is this? What's happening, or what happened? It was more what happened. What brought this about? But you've already said that.
Yeah, the apparent distance between the subject and the object, between the self and the other, is being collapsed.
Yeah, gone.
And that collapse of the distance between the self and, in this case, the object, is what we call beauty. That's what the experience of beauty is. Did you not feel that the Aboriginal painting, Rothko's painting, and
Van Gogh
and Van Gogh's painting, did you not feel they were all beautiful?
Extraordinarily beautiful.
Yeah, so what is it? What is it that was really? What was in that moment? What was the experience of beauty? Because remember, beauty was common to each of the 3 paintings, and therefore cannot have been a characteristic of the individual painting, because it was shared between the 3 paintings, and you saw the 3 paintings at 3 separate times and at 3 separate places. So what was beauty was the common element. So the beauty couldn't have been in the object, because the Van Gogh painting wasn't present when you were viewing the Rothko. But what was the experience of beauty? It was the same experience in each case. What was that?
Love comes to mind immediately.
Well, love is exactly the same experience, but we tend to use the word love in relation to people and animals. We use the word beauty in relation to objects, but they're the identical experience. Love, when you feel love for someone, do you not feel, at least to a certain extent, the collapse of the sense of separation? Isn't that what love is? The feeling you and I are not separate. That's what love is, the collapse of the sense of separation. In other words, love is not a relationship, it is the absence of relationship.
And
it is
infinite.
The collapse of relationship.
Yeah.
Yes, it is infinite in the sense that there are no separate finite selves. The separate finite self dissolves in love. The object, the separate object, the distinction between ourself and the object dissolves in the experience of beauty. And that's why we love music. It's why we love dancing. It's why we love painting. It's why we love reading. It's not for the object itself. It's for the experience of beauty or love.
Yeah.
And artists will go to extraordinary degrees to make an object, be that object a painting, a bowl, a dance, a sonata. Artists will go to great lengths to make an object that has this power. Not just to make something that is pleasing to the eye, not just to make something that is pretty, but to make something that has this power.
But I can imagine you don't come there by rationalizing or thinking about it.
No,
how will I do this? How will I do that?
No, most artists don't rationalize this process.
No.
Cézanne did. He was very explicit
Okay.
about what he was doing. He said, he was standing in front of Mont Saint-Victoire, and he said, everything vanishes, falls apart, doesn't it? Nature is always the same, and yet nothing in her that appears to us lasts. Our art must render the thrill of her permanence, along with her elements, the appearance of all her changes. It must give us the taste of nature's eternity. So that was a summary of this morning's meditation.
Well,
Cézanne knew
nice
exactly what he was doing. He was standing in front of this granite edifice that had apparently been there for millions of years, and he said everything vanishes, falls apart, doesn't it? What he was saying is, all I know of this mountain is perception, and my perceptions are always vanishing. The world, the solidity of the world falls apart every time a perception vanishes. Everything vanishes, falls apart, doesn't it? But then he contradicts himself. He says, but nature is always the same. And yet, nothing in her that appears to us lasts. So now he's saying nature is always the same. We all feel that there is something that is always the same in our experience of the world. And yet, nothing that appears in the world lasts. Therefore, what is it that is always the same? What gives rise to our sense the world is always the same, if all we know of that same world are changing, different perceptions? And so then he said, our art must render the thrill of her permanence. It must give us a sense of that which is always the same in nature, along with her elements, the appearance of all her changes. In other words, as an artist, you must take the changing elements of nature, in his case, colour. So his paintings are full of colour. You must take work with the elements, the changing elements of nature, but in order to draw attention to that which is always the same. And then he concludes and summarizes everything. Our art must give us a taste of nature's eternity. So that was this morning's meditation. Cézanne's way of showing how you go from the object, Mont Saint-Victoire in his case, the mountain, to that which is always, to nature's eternity, the existence, self-aware existence or consciousness. But that was his way, because he was a painter and he was interested in colour and form. And he and Van Gogh, another example. There are so many examples in history of artists that have gone to extraordinary lengths, absurd lengths by most people's standards, to refine their skill, to remove anything that is superfluous from it, and until they make an object or a book or a piece of music or whatever it is that has this power. And the power usually comes in two forms. It's either explosive, and it blows you away. Or it's more gentle, it's dissolving, and it dissolves the sense of separation.
Thank you very much. That was beautiful. Thank you.
Beethoven is an example of someone whose music has this explosive kind of cosmic force to it. It just annihilates you when you're listening to
Bach.
it. Whereas Bach is more, you follow him through all the modulations. You're led on this journey, and almost without knowing it, that you're dissolved as you listen.